My name is Nathan, I'm 27, and up until about 6 weeks ago, I thought my relationship with my family was complicated but salvageable. You know, that classic dynamic where you're the one keeping the peace while they slowly chip away at your sanity. I never really had a normal family growing up. My mom played favorites, my dad checked out before I hit high school, and my younger sister, Melanie, somehow convinced the whole world she was a delicate princess when really, she's more like a full-time manipulator with a sparkly Instagram filter. But despite everything, I stayed close. I mean, close enough. I helped when I could. I showed up for birthdays, sent gifts on holidays, took their late-night phone calls even when I had work early the next day. I even stepped up in 2021 when mom started panicking about possibly losing the house. The property taxes were piling up, some overdue, others just unpaid out of neglect, and with my sister still living there at the time, supposedly between jobs, the stress was thick in the air every time I visited. So I paid. Quietly. Without lecturing, without demanding anything in return. I just set up an auto pay to cover the property taxes so they wouldn't lose the house mom always claimed meant everything to her. At the time, I figured it was the responsible thing to do. It wasn't even about the money, it was about stability. It was about being the adult they never quite managed to become themselves. But here's the thing about giving too much for too long. Eventually, people stop seeing it as kindness and start seeing it as currency they're entitled to. The shift started subtly. Fewer thank you texts. More assumptions. My name slowly stopped appearing on things. It was always Melanie's house, even though she hadn't made a single payment toward it. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just speaking casually, that they didn't mean anything by it. Then, about 2 months ago, I dropped by to pick up a box of old yearbooks I had left in the attic. Melanie opened the door wearing this smug little smirk and immediately said, "Oh, didn't mom tell you? We're redecorating. There's no space for your junk anymore." I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. "Okay, but I'll just grab the box and be out in 10. "No," she said flatly, her smile turning syrupy. "You're not coming in. This is my home now, and we don't want you hovering around." I stood there, stunned. I looked past her shoulder into the living room. My mom was on the couch with a glass of wine in hand, flipping through a catalog. She didn't even bother standing up. "I pay the taxes on this place," I said, keeping my voice even. "I just want my box." Mom didn't look at me. Didn't even blink. "You're making a scene, Nathan. Don't be dramatic. It's just a box." "Then let me get it," I said, starting to step forward, and that's when Melanie physically blocked the door. "Goodbye, Nathan," she said, before slamming it in my face. That was the first time I really paused and asked myself what I was even doing for these people anymore. I stood there on the porch for a long time. I could hear them inside, laughing, not even trying to keep their voices down. I didn't text or call for a few days after that. I needed time to process, to cool off. But then, out of nowhere, I got that message from my mother. "Don't come around anymore," she texted. "This is your sister's home now. We've changed the locks." That one knocked the wind out of me. It was so final, so calculated. Not, "We need space," not, "Can we talk?" Just a decree. A closure of doors, literally and emotionally. And then, like a final jab, she added, "Hope you understand." But what she didn't seem to understand was, I did understand. I understood exactly how they saw me. As a wallet. As a backup plan. As someone whose kindness had officially expired the moment it wasn't convenient for them anymore. I stared at the message for a few minutes before replying. "Got it," I wrote. "But you forgot who's been paying property taxes since 2021. Then I logged into the county portal, canceled the auto pay with one click, and forwarded one simple email, the same one I had saved from the original tax office notice when I first took responsibility for the payments. The ownership had always been messy, and Melanie had never formally transferred the deed from mom's name. That made things easier than I expected. Within 48 hours, I got a screenshot from Melanie. No greeting. No smiley face this time. Just, "Why is there an eviction notice on the door?" I didn't reply. Instead, I took a breath, then opened my laptop and listed the house. But that's not even the beginning of how everything unraveled. Because what I didn't know then was that Melanie had been throwing weekly parties in that house like she owned it outright, and had promised several of her friends they could move in with her by summer. She had even posted a TikTok to her showing off the new modern kitchen remodel that she definitely hadn't paid for. Meanwhile, Mom had been telling her church group that Melanie was settling down and that I had graciously signed the house over out of love. So when that for sale sign hit the lawn, everything began to fall apart. Melanie didn't call. She screamed, through voicemails, through texts, through mutual friends. By the time the real estate listing had been live for 24 hours, I had over a dozen messages from her that swung wildly between pleading, threatening, and pathetic. One moment it was, "Nathan, please, can we talk? We can fix this." And the next it was, "You're ruining your own mother's life, you narcissist." I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I forwarded the listing to my realtor, who was more than happy to take over the rest. The house had been in a great neighborhood with rising property values, and once she saw the condition and photos, she said, "If you want this gone fast, I know 5 investors who will offer above asking before it even hits market." Apparently, the kitchen remodel Melanie bragged about in her TikTok video had been half-funded by some guy she was seeing, who was now asking for reimbursement with receipts after seeing the house up for sale. Her influencer dreams? Crumbling in real time. But that wasn't the part that hit hardest. The real storm came 3 days after the listing went live. I was at my apartment, quietly eating leftovers and watching a documentary, when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find, of all people, my mother. In person. No warning. She looked frazzled. Not her usual polished but cold self. Hair messy, makeup smeared like she'd been crying but didn't want to admit it. She didn't ask if she could come in. She just walked past me, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. "Nathan," she said, voice shaky but somehow still full of that entitled edge. "This has gone too far." I didn't say anything at first. I just crossed my arms and waited. "I understand you were hurt," she continued. "But this isn't how family handles things. You don't just sell your sister's home." I blinked, then slowly asked, "Her home? Or yours?" She bristled at that. "You know what I mean." "No," I said, finally stepping forward. "I don't. Because when you texted me and said, 'Don't come around anymore,' you made it very clear this wasn't my home. You changed the locks. You called it Melanie's. So now I'm treating it exactly like that. A house I've been financially responsible for. Nothing more. Nothing less." She sat down, as if suddenly the weight of the truth had punched her in the chest. "Do you have any idea what this will do to us?" she asked, voice cracking. "Melanie has nowhere else to go. She was planning to start her new job next month." "After what?" I cut in. "A year of finding herself, while posting day-in-the-life reels and begging for Venmo tips? And let me guess, you were going to float her until she's stabilized. Using what, exactly? The money you haven't had in years." That shut her up. "Mom," I said, calmer now, "I covered that house for 3 years. I paid the taxes so you wouldn't lose it. Not because I owed it to you, but because I thought you deserved to keep it. Then you handed it over to someone who's never worked a day in her life and told me that I wasn't welcome. What did you think would happen?" She looked up at me with wide, glassy eyes. For a second, she didn't look like the woman who used to remind me at every family dinner that Melanie was the artistic one, and I was the reliable one. She looked like someone who had finally realized the safety net wasn't actually stitched to the floor. "I didn't think you'd go this far," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Neither did I." She tried bargaining after that. Said she'd talk to Melanie. That maybe they'd agree to sign the house over in exchange for just a few more months to figure things out. I listened. I nodded. And then I told her I'd think about it. But I already knew I wasn't changing a thing. Because what she didn't know was that Melanie had already called the real estate office, pretending to be me, and tried to cancel the listing. When they asked for ID verification, she started screaming and hung up. They flagged the attempt and reported it back to me. And it got worse. I found out through my realtor that the property had been trashed the day after the notice was posted. Broken cabinet doors, holes in the drywall, even graffiti on the garage wall that read, "Enjoy your empty victory." I filed a police report. My name was still tied to the tax records, which meant I could claim damages. My realtor took photos. It only made my case stronger. The kicker? They still thought I might back down. That maybe, if they begged just right or spun the sob story hard enough, I'd turn around and say, "Okay, let's pretend none of this happened." But they underestimated one very simple fact. You don't get to exile someone, tell them they're no longer family, change the locks on them, and then act surprised when they stop protecting you. Especially when they're the only reason you still had a roof over your head to begin with. So when Melanie texted again the next morning, just a single screenshot of the eviction notice, followed by the words, "This is your fault. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. Because by then, it was already under contract. The contract moved quickly, faster than I expected, honestly. Within 4 days, I had 3 solid offers, all above asking. One investor even offered to close in under 2 weeks, no contingencies. It was surreal, watching it happen from my laptop while sipping coffee like it was any other Wednesday. This house, their home, as they'd branded it, was now little more than a checkbox in a real estate transaction. A transaction I controlled. I hadn't said a word to either of them since Mom's visit. Melanie kept sending texts, each more frantic than the last. First it was guilt. You're kicking your own mother onto the street. Then gaslighting. You always twist things to make us look bad. You've been like this since we were kids. And finally, flat-out desperation. She even sent me a photo of her standing outside the front door, arms crossed, trying to look tough, but barely holding it together. The caption read, "You're destroying this family over a few $1,000s. Grow up." I didn't reply, because it wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It was about years of being used, of being the one they leaned on while calling me too serious behind my back, of paying off their messes and getting handed attitude in return, of being the fallback plan, the plan B, while they built a fantasy world on the assumption that I'd always stay quiet. This wasn't revenge for one bad text or one slammed door. It was years of build-up, and now, it was finally shifting in my favor. But just when I thought the worst was over, the real twist came, not from Melanie or my mom, but from the buyer. It was late afternoon when I got the call from my realtor, Brianna. "Hey, Nathan," she said, cheerful as ever. "So, funny thing, the buyer who submitted the best offer? Turns out she's a landlord who specializes in renting out student housing. She's planning to turn the property into a 3-unit rental." I blinked. "Wait, student housing?" "Yup," she said, chuckling. "They're gutting it and doing a full conversion. I saw her architectural plans. It's going to look completely different. She's not interested in keeping anything from the original layout." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Like, full-on laugh for the first time in weeks. Melanie had always been obsessed with aesthetics. Every piece of furniture, every throw pillow, every backsplash tile had to be Instagram-worthy. She used to rant about wanting to start an Airbnb or launch some home aesthetic blog. And now, her sacred space was about to be sliced up into 3 little dorm-style apartments with IKEA bunk beds and mini fridges. Brianna continued. "There's more. She asked if you'd be okay with them beginning prep work early. Technically, they can't take possession until closing, but she's hoping you'll sign a waiver so they can at least do the inspection and get measurements this week." "Sure," I said, not even hesitating. Let her in. And that's when the next message came. Not from Melanie. From our old neighbor, Mrs. Collier. A sweet woman in her 70s who still baked banana bread and always waved at the mailman. Her text simply read, "Nathan, I thought you should know. I saw some contractors walking through the front yard today." Melanie came outside in a robe and started yelling. Something about people violating her space. Apparently, no one had told her about the sale, or the renovation, or the fact that she didn't own anything, which was when I realized. She still thought I'd back down, that I was bluffing. I stared at the message for a long time, then pulled up the contractor's contact info that Brianna had forwarded me. I sent a quick text, "You may want to bring security, just in case." And sure enough, 2 days later, I got the confirmation. Melanie had tried to block the inspectors from entering. She'd parked her car sideways across the driveway, stood in front of the porch, and started live streaming on Instagram about how corporate landlords were invading her safe space. The contractor called the sheriff. She was escorted off the property. That night, Mom finally cracked. She called from a number I didn't recognize and left a voicemail. Her voice was hollow, less angry now, more tired. "Broken. You win," she said. "Is that what you wanted? To watch us fall apart? To see your sister humiliated? I hope it was worth it." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. I just stopped saving them. I stared at the ceiling that night, wondering if they were finally getting it. That this wasn't a tantrum. That I wasn't acting out of spite. I had just stopped playing the part they wrote for me. The dependable son. The wallet. The fixer. But even as the closing date drew near, even as the contractors marked walls and measured beams, I had a feeling they weren't done yet. That there was one last act of desperation waiting in the wings. Something messy. Something bold. And I was right. Because just 3 days before closing, I got an email from the title company. Subject line, "Urgent, claim of ownership filed." They had tried one last trick. Dear Mr. Halden, please be advised that we've received notice of a formal claim of ownership on the property currently under contract, filed by Ms. Melanie Halden. Due to the nature of the claim, the sale will need to be paused until the claim is reviewed and resolved. We will be contacting the county clerk and the buyer to inform them of the delay. A response from you or your legal representative is requested within 48 hours. I just stared at the screen. Melanie had filed a fraudulent ownership claim. It shouldn't have shocked me. It really shouldn't have. But somehow, she still managed to find new ways to scrape the bottom of the entitlement barrel and then dig deeper. I called Brianna right away, and she answered on the second ring. Yeah, she sighed. I just saw it. I've never had this happen before. She doesn't even own the house, I said, pacing across my living room. Her name isn't on the deed. It's still under my mom's name. And I've been paying the taxes on it for 3 years. She's literally just a squatter with good lighting. I know, Brianna said calmly. But these things follow process. The claim has to be addressed, even if it's baseless. And how long is that going to take? A few weeks. Maybe longer if she pushes. My jaw clenched. Melanie wasn't trying to win. She was trying to stall. Cause chaos. Blow up the deal. Get just enough time to rally sympathy or twist the story into something usable. Maybe another viral TikTok about being evicted by her evil brother. I'd seen that one coming too. Luckily, I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. That night, I called my mom. Not out of guilt. Not to beg. I called because I knew the one person Melanie would listen to, if only out of desperation, was the woman who used to control her with one sentence and a raised eyebrow. She didn't pick up. So I left a message. You can fix this. Or you can go down with her. But you don't get to block me and expect me to stay silent. Melanie has until Friday to withdraw the claim, or I will file for legal damages. And I will win. I hung up. No yelling. No drama. Just facts. The next morning, I had an email from the title company again. Subject, claim withdrawn, sale resumes. I didn't even need to ask what happened behind the scenes. I could picture it clearly. Mom storming into Melanie's room, tearing the phone out of her hand, finally realizing that protecting her golden child might leave her homeless too. That she couldn't charm or gild her way out of this anymore. That she'd backed the wrong horse. The closing date was pushed back by a week due to the paperwork delay, but the buyer didn't pull out. In fact, she upped her deposit and told Brianna she was more committed than ever. Apparently, she'd seen the video of Melanie trying to block the inspectors and found it hilarious. Said it would make a great before and after story for her rental website. And then, it was done. Just like that. Signed, sealed, funded. $437,000 wired to my account. The house was gone. I sat in my apartment that night staring at the confirmation email. No music. No lights. Just me, the screen, and a cold soda I hadn't even finished. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Triumphant. Victorious. What I felt, mostly, was quiet. Like I'd finally put down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying since I was a teenager. It wasn't just the house. It was all of it. The manipulation. The guilt. The unspoken contract that said, you'll clean up our messes because that's what good sons do. The endless emotional tab I'd been footing since I learned how to drive. Gone. I expected there to be fallout. Screaming. Doorstep drama. But there wasn't. Melanie unfollowed me on everything. Posted one last reel about how the system fails women every day and then went radio silent. Mom sent me a single text a week later. You made your choice. I hope it keeps you warm at night. I stared at it for a long time. Then replied, it will. Central heating works great in my new place. Because yes, I used part of the money to buy a condo. Nothing flashy. Just a quiet, modern one-bedroom in a good neighborhood. No roommates. No noise. No unpaid debts hiding in the walls. The rest of the money went into a high-yield savings account and a college fund for my goddaughter, my best friend's kid, who once drew me a picture and said I was her favorite uncle because I listened. It hit me then. That was it. That's all I ever wanted. Not to win. Not to gloat. Just to be seen, heard, respected, even if only by the people who actually deserve to have me in their lives. A few months later, I ran into Mrs. Collier outside a coffee shop. She hugged me tight and said, I hope you don't feel bad for what you did. That girl needed a wake-up call. I told her I didn't. And I meant it. Because sometimes, the most painful part of growing up isn't letting go of the people who hurt you. It's realizing they were never holding on to you in the first place. They just like the convenience of your grip. And once you let go, you're free. For real this time. not waiting on their approval, not waiting for them to change. Just finally free.